The first glimpse of Brahman is through Buddhi. Like a flash of lightning. It's so fast and penetrating, it strikes us. You can't hold on to it. Anything comes born to thought, you can hold on and put it in your pocket, you can fold it, write it on the paper, keep it in your memory. You can certainly have it. It's yours. Hold it. It belongs to the mind, not a biggie. Nothing you can hold which belongs to the intellect. You cannot hold it. And yet it gives insight which is, by its velocity, superior, incomparably superior than anything can ever be born to the mind. So we have this classical exposition on the Tattvas. And these Tattvas, they are categories of consciousness, 36 in Kashmir Shaivism altogether. From the first Tattva, either Shiva or Paramashiva, it doesn't matter, this is where we begin to split hairs. In some cases you will come across of this spoken of. The very first Tattva is Paramashiva. In other cases you will come across of the first Tattva as being Shiva, and then second Tattva is Shakti. More helpful when they will be drawn in terms of the graphically represented, holding the same values. In other words, they will be not Shiva and Shakti under Shiva as a subordinate, but they will be placed together, either superimposed as in some, let's say, diagrams made by some scholars, or right next to each other. This is very helpful understanding because it positions us again in that lieu of relationship between Shiva and Shakti, that coveted proverbial prakasha, vimarsha, awareness and the power of self-awareness. Awareness and the power to reflect its own luminosity back onto itself. Right? We continuously draw that 8 laying down as the symbol for infinity. So it's 2 in 1, 1 in 2, rubber band, twisted, right? It's 1, twisted, creates 2. It seems like 2, but it's really 1. It's a very helpful analogy. So the first tattvas, the categories, tattvas, what are tattvas? Tat, that, translated into English. Tat, and it's at the root of that term, that, in any case. Tattva, it's suchness, thatness, that each category here simply represents. So it's the essence of what it is. So each tattva, each category, in the concept of the manifestation, be it 24 tattvas of the classical Samkhya, or the 36 tattvas of the Shaivites, it's the manifestation in motion. That manifestation in motion has these categories. We can speak of them as distinctive departures, distinctive phases, steps. The very helpful analogy I find is in simply observing nature. And observing nature closely, we could see this as an illustration. I gave example over the years of the life of the almond tree. So the tree wakes up from a slumber of the winter months, and it's first covered in buds before any of shoots will come. Just the buds that contain what would become the flowers. These buds protect and contain the flower, but it's a bud. It's not a flower yet. So that's a category. So it represents a specific stage in that tree. And then the bud opens, pops out, and it gives way to a flower, and the husk of the bud flies away. And then we have this almond tree in bloom. Beautiful sight to behold. tree is covered in flowers. It blossoms. So what we have right now is this, a blossoming tree. This flower is representing, again, thatness of that particular stage. It gives the possibility for being pollinated and thus conceiving the future kernel, conceiving that for what this flower is there. Its purpose is done. So the wind carries away the petals, and then what we have is the small little future almond. It's not an almond yet. It's this little thing that is left on the tree, protruding forward where the flower was. And as it will get more and more mature, we will see how that covered in green now shelter, soft, so as to protect the, in that stage, almond, which doesn't even have the hard shell, with that green new level of opaque husk. So with time, the almond will have the chance to develop. And that necessity for that green cover will no longer be there. Close to the time when the harvest comes, that green will pop out. And this is a very beautiful sight as well, when almond trees are filled with these offerings, where that green, mossy, velvety texture dries up, pops up, and the actual almond nut protrudes forward in its hard shell, now fully protecting itself. You can see each stage here represents a particular thatness in the life of the almond tree. We could say that each stage has unique appearance, and each stage conceals the preceding stage. So the flower conceals the bud. That newly developing kernel conceals the flower that gave its way, and so forth. In likewise manner, we could say that in the process of manifestation, each tattva conceals the preceding one within itself. Yet what remains at all times, let's say if we continue with an example of the almond tree, is the very source of that tree, which is the sap. That sap remains the same throughout. That sap is what nourishes every stage, every phase of that almond tree. That sap does not undergo change. That sap remains the same. So that what is exemplified by the first tattva or tattvas, in this case Shiva Shakti, remains intact through the entirety of manifestation. What remains intact? Awareness and its power for self-reflection. Its power to throw its own luminosity back onto itself. So there's, in a way, we could say there's no such thing as clinical, pure awareness without the power of self-awareness. This is the beauty of Tantra. It is the beauty of Tantra because it will become more apparent that Shakti is what takes over. In all the process of manifestation, it will then be in the domain of Shakti. Because Shiva now, or Shiva's power now, is expressed through that for what Shakti stands. So this is how Shiva conceals itself, you see, conceals itself, or being concealed whichever way you want to put it, in the process of manifestation. So in other words, the concealment of Shiva begins from the very moment manifestation kicks in. So that esoteric theological perspective, which is distinguished by that understanding of what perhaps has been a reinstatement of the earlier Upanishadic axioms, exemplified by that what we chant at the end of our meditation sessions. Purnamada Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamudachyate, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnat Purnam Eva Vashishyate, Purnamada Purnamidam. That absolute is full. This relative is full. And so it goes. From fullness, fullness comes into being. By fullness it is being sustained, into fullness is being reabsorbed. What remains is fullness. At all times, fullness is not diminished. Just as in the life of the almond tree, at all times, whether this tree is standing there, bereft of everything, it's a winter time. It doesn't mean the tree is not alive. Nothing happened to its sap. And then suddenly the tree changes its dimension. Imagine you'd never seen an almond tree. You come from a different part of the world. You come at the time when the almond tree is in blossom. And you would think that, well, that's how the almond tree looks. That's what almond tree is, the tree covered in these flowers. But it's a very short-lived phase. And you were there for 2 days. And you made these conclusions. So when you come later on, in a year, and you suddenly discovered the tree is all green and covered in these offerings in the form of these hard-shell nuts, you would be surprised and puzzled why this tree now completely different. Am I hallucinating? What is at place? So this is a kind of analogy to reflect and understand on the process of manifestation, how each stage, each phase conceals itself, how the preceding stage is enveloped in the unfolding stage, and thus gobbles in with it that what the preceding stage exemplifies. So the concealment of awareness begins from the ensuing moment of manifestation. To begin with, the power takes over, its own power. At this phase of manifestation, when we speak of the Tattvas, it is on par, equal with, therefore spoken of as Shiva Shakti, Shakti Shiva. And not only that, now we have to make that further stride towards understanding that the first 5 Tattvas are called Shuddha Tattvas. Why are they Shuddha Tattvas? Why are they pure? Why are they pure? Because the further ensuing 3 Tattvas after Shiva, Shakti, that what stands for the will, knowledge and action, are the very attributes of awareness. The very attributes, primordial attributes. They do not undergo any change, any modification. Contrary to that, manifestation follows that very, very dynamic relationship exemplified by will, knowledge, action. See? Okay, in the process of manifestation, when we were giving that exposition at the Soundstuff, at the Good Soundstuff, we spoke about it, like giving due to the classical Shaivite understanding, naming them like Shiva, Shakti, right? Then comes the Sadashiva, Ishvara and Shuddha Vidya. But what the Sadashiva, Ishvara and Shuddha Vidya stand for, they stand for the aforementioned will, knowledge and action. Or rather, that very, very tattva of Sadashiva, which is the third tattva, Ishvara, the fourth tattva, and Shuddha Vidya, pure knowledge, that's how to translate, Shuddha Vidya, are here carrying the attributes of will, knowledge and action, or Iksha Jnana Kriya. And this is where that trinity of Kashmir Shaivism is set in motion. You see? So the first five tattvas here exemplify the first five pure categories. And it is from there on, as we already touched upon yesterday, for the manifestation to proceed from the homogeneity of pure awareness, which, as it were, has no shape, no form, no nothing that one can put one's finger on, literally. In order for it to proceed towards taking any form, it needs to begin to limit its unlimited qualities. You see? So in other words, everything that is now represented here by omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, beyond time and space, because these are primal qualities exemplified by first five pure tattvas, would need to be limited there and then. Hence, the five coverings, the five Kanchukas. You see how in the very first stage, the very first five categories are being, as it were, undergoing self-modification. Call it whatever, you poet, self-mutilation, cancelling itself, filtering itself, opaquing itself, covering itself. Because there is no way for formation. There is no way to know itself in its fullness. So this is how the philosophical and theological understanding here, or what it operates with rather. So in order for Shiva to behold its own magnificence, it needs to limit itself. There's no other way. Otherwise, we could just speculate. It's pure, unimpeded, eternal light. One mass of awareness. Nothing in that. Absolutely nothing. There's no form, no content, no namarupa, nothing. How do you know yourself in that? You see? What are you? Who are you? That same question that is pertinent to the individual is contemplated perhaps by awareness, which prompts itself to burst with the tremendous powers exemplified by these three carrying Shaktis. Shaktis of will, knowledge and action. Iksha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti. And the first thing to be done is to conceal the unlimited potency of each of the pure tattvas. Hence, the five Kanchukas are that what does the job. From there on, the whole ground is ready for the Maya. The whole ground is ready for the Maya to proceed. You see? For the Maya to proceed, that's what's required here. Kanchukas. So these are the operating powers. And these Kanchukas, these five coverings, conceal each of the aforementioned Shaktis, including Shiva himself, by applying the very powers. So it's like, in order to conceal that, you conceal it with its own power. It's like wrestling with yourself. How strong are my biceps? What is stronger, my triceps or my biceps? I'm trying to flex the right arm, but with the left I'm pushing it back. Which one is stronger? I don't know, because they're equally concealing each other. You see? I may be omnipotent in this arm, but this one is checking it. Reflect on this. This is very helpful understanding to see that dynamic tension in creation. How everything carries its opposite power, and that what conceals it. This would be the answers you can stumble upon yourself with what you have brought out, what you have brought out. It is all to do with manifestation of reality and how we supposedly manifest our own. This is all to do with what you have brought out, right? The role of the will, intention. So, revisiting these basics, the fundamentals, gives us this a cosmic, cosmological overview, because it is a cosmology. The cosmology for which Shaivites are known, and what is considered to be as the richest offering in the whole oikimen of the Indian subcontinent, where that creme de la creme of everything that was there prior is now given that mix, given that infusion. So we have this 36 tattvas. And from there on, when all the coverings in place, now all this is down to finessing the details. This is just finessing the details. This is where the templates come into play. But before that takes place, the Antaḥkaraṇa is created. That internal or inner organ, the Antaḥkaraṇa. In some places you will come across as made of three, right? Buddhi, Ahamkara, and Manas, or intellect, sense of I, limited sense of I, and mind. And in other cases we will come across as made of four. An additional would be chitti, chit, as consciousness. The significance of that is that in a classical sense you will come across as three in the Samkhya discourse. But I suggest you look into the Shaivites' perspective here, the Antaḥkaraṇa made here of four. So let's say we have a circle, we divide this in equal measure, and we'll have, it's like a cake, creates 4 quarters. So it's made of chit, buddhi, ahamkara, and manas. But chit stands here for the quality of consciousness in its relation to impressions and memory. That's why it's an inner organ. And they interact. It's a conglomerate, like the human heart is a conglomerate and interacts. It's a seat of divinity. It's an expression of the goddess, but it has a job to do. It has 2 sides, 2 stomachs, right? It pumps the blood, it connects the large cycle with the smaller cycle and so forth through the arteries. It has a pace, rhythm, heartbeat. Antaḥkaraṇa is the same. As an inner organ, it's sometimes, very often, particularly in hermeneutic traditions like Sufism, spoken of as that the heart, Galb. This is the Tantrikas Antaḥkaraṇa. So, from the Antaḥkaraṇa, then the manifestation unstoppable. 10 indriyas made of 5 Gyanindriyas and 5 Karmindriyas. As you can sense in the knowledge of Sanskrit already, Gyanindriyas, right? Gyana, Indriyas, and Karma Indriyas. The instruments of knowledge and the instruments of action. is created. And then all this is just a little bit further to complete the picture. The Maya completes its hologram. It completes its matrix. Tanmatras and Mahabhutas come into play. Again come in 5. 5 Tanmatras and 5 Mahabhutas. See? And of course, before we spoke about this, I didn't give it like one by one the unfoldment, but in the formation of the Antaḥkaraṇa, what precedes that was the constituency of the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti. So let's deal with it very quickly. If you are a scholar of Samkhya philosophy, then you would have been taught from the point of view of 24 Tattvas, where Purusha and Prakriti, the first 2 Tattvas. Since the system is dualistic, you would have Purusha and Prakriti independent from each other, even though Prakriti comes from Purusha, but it never goes back into Purusha. It never goes back to superimpose on Purusha. It gains reality of its own. The eternal spirit and the eternal matter, materia prima. So that's the Samkhya for you. So of course, when incorporated into the system of the Shaivites, Purusha would belong to Ashudha Tattvas, whereas the Prakriti would belong already to the manifested plane of creation. That what this whole matrix is made of. The measuring quality, not what it seems, the Maya Shakti, and so forth. So this is the overview, without going into specifics and details of Indriyas, Tanmatras and Mahabhutas, overview of the Tattvas, the categories of creation, the process of manifestation. So now we have this, it's a map, right? It's a conceptual framework of understanding. And of course, it is for the purpose of working with. One of the most important aspects here is what is exemplified by the, let's say, moment of the fall. We use this now, a universal language. And it is happens at the level of the heart, at the level of that Antaḥkaraṇa. Because by virtue of the correlation or relationship between those composite elements, composite tattvas, what stands for Buddhi, which is translated as intellect, the power of intellect, is what is reflecting the higher order, and therefore it reflects the high order. What is here stands, or expression of manas, which stands for the mind, is always colored by the expression of the lower order. So this is, in simple terms, why our mind is constantly pulled down into the creation. As it were, mind is already seduced by the senses, constantly pulled down into the domain of the Indriyas, senses, right? So, mind, as it were, already corruptible by nature here. Its nature, its corruptibility is proverbial, whereas Buddhi is incorruptible. Buddhi's, as it were, propensity, it's always up. It carries in itself, if you will, the memory of the whole. It carries in itself the memory of the higher order. Whereas manas doesn't have that. It is subjected to the pendulum of subject-object relationship to such degree that when there is nothing to compare, mind has no place. It's good for operational functioning. But there's no functioning beyond that for the mind. So what does mind have to do? It has two choices, basically. We're now breaking it down, really, like just have to make it very, very simple. It stands here faced with two choices. Surrender means transcend, which means become no mind, right? Which means being converted into the higher order where intellect takes over, Buddhi takes over. But it cannot do that because there is Ahamkara between, that sense of individuality, which in itself, and according to some expositions, Samkhya expositions certainly often emphasizes, for simplicity's sake again, that universal mind, then intellect as Buddhi, and then infusion of Buddhi with a sense of limited I, Ahamkara, gives birth to the mind. Again, intellect is always impersonal, whereas mind always personal. Why that is? Reflect on this. Intelligence is impersonal. Mind activity is always personal. It is colored by Ahamkara, according to Samkhya, because in itself it is composed. Like one element and another element infused into it completely gives birth to a third element. Buddhi infused with the sense of I gives rise to the mind. See? So in Shaivite, let's say, from the Shaivite's point of view, here the whole dynamic here, this dynamic, is that tension. And it is spoken of in terms of, let's say, the internal anatomy, which for the time being we will omit. It deals with the multrikonas, it deals with these equilaterals. We touched up on that in the Kundalini course. It will be in the book. It's an intricate subject in its own right, because this is pertinent to the process. Right now we're still giving to the overview, to this theological overview, but more already from the practical perspective. So the propensity of the mind is by constantly being drawn down into the sphere of manifestation, where the senses effectively find their fullness of expression, equipped with the organs of cognition, and there we go. This is the marvel. This is where we all revel. This is where it reaches that final frontier. It's both the final frontier and the Wild West. You see? Everyone puts the medal, whatever, star here and calls himself a sheriff. You know, you have the revolver Colt and you quick guy, you know, and everyone is dead. See? I'm just light-hearting this analogy because it is a Wild West. The final frontier is a Wild West. You see? Because that's what this is. It's reaching that point. It deliberately goes to that fullness of manifestation. There are heavy prices to pay, but we'll leave this aside now. So, whilst the property and the functioning of the intellect is constantly reflect the Absolute. That's why in the Brahma Sutras, the first glimpse of Brahman is through Buddhi. Like a flash of lightning. It's so fast and penetrating, it strikes us. You can't hold on to it. Anything comes born to thought, you can hold on and put it in your pocket, you can fold it, write it on the paper, keep it in your memory. You can certainly have it, it's yours. Hold it. It belongs to the mind, not a biggie. Nothing you can hold which belongs to the intellect. You cannot hold it. And yet it gives insight which is, by its velocity, superior, incomparably superior than anything can ever be born to the mind. Again, I'd like to give this always, as you know, illustrations from so-called life we live in, culture we share. Every display of genius is the flash of intellect. Whether this is Einstein or Mozart or whomever you want, or Jordan scoring, defying the laws of gravity, and just putting the ball into a basket. Whatever genius there is, it's a flash of intellect. Whatever the note comes in that haunting hour of how to write that requiem, when your wife is dying, when you have no rent to pay, your name is Mozart, you don't know nothing, you are Gandharva locked in the human body, you freaking lost forever here. But the music is alive. You put Mozart now, you listen to it, you will cry. Requiem has that quality. It has the C minor that freaking splits your heart, no matter where you are. It hits the note in such a way that you know it speaks to the mortality of it all. And he wrote that at the edge of the abyss. Intellect. Buddhi is here at play. Any theory of relativity, theory of everything, anything that Einstein ever came up with, was given to him in a dream, in a nap, in a flash of intuition. So this is where we give this. So that's where the work is. The work is at the level of the inner organ. At the level of the inner organ. So up until the inner organ is positioned in such a way that the priority is given to the mind, and it usurps that priority in that relationship, in the inner organ. You see, it usurps that. It's seduced, it just doesn't know, silly thing. It simply doesn't know what it actually is, because the mind is sattva. Mind is an expression of sattva. Some teachers say this and that I came across recently, but it's like I'm done with all this BS. It's like, let's not even go there, but it's like mind is being again framed. And no, mind, yes, corruptible, but the essence of the mind is sattva. So when we spoke about the mind has only two choices, choice to surrender or choice to revel. There's no compromise. There's no compromise. At least so it seems. At least at the stage we are caught in. Because if someone thinks that they can find fulfillment in that sphere where mind is already seduced by continuous to and fro and going around the circles of the activity, ceaseless activity of the senses. In other words, one wants to find one's fulfillment in the ever-changing sphere of life. It's that story with the almond tree. You know, you came back and you're lamenting where the flowers gone. You know, where are the flowers? Where the heck is flowers? Well, sorry, man, you know nothing about the sakura. You're freaking the passerby, you know, mleka in a foreign country. You don't know what it means. We made it into the symbol of our order. Okay, not almond, it's a cherry blossom. Cherry blossom. Fleeting moment, that's what life is. Shogun carries that in its precious graphic display of its philosophy. That cherry blossom.